when your pain is treated like a punchline for so long, you start believing it's just how families are. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy. Today's episode, we're going to be uncovering the subtle, systemic, and often invisible abuse the scapegoat endures. The moment you start talking about your family dynamic and realize it wasn't okay at all. That's where the graduation cake example comes in, right?
Right. I thought it was normal until I saw someone else's face when I said it out loud. And when your pain is treated like a punchline for so long, you start believing it's just how families are, you know? But once you kind of look at the horror in like a healthy person's face when you say it, and suddenly your whole childhood, your whole experience clicks into place. And that quote unquote normal you accepted reveals a terrifying truth, really. And so when you talk about the graduation cake example, most people's high school graduation cake will say things like, congrats, we're so proud of you, go change the world, or, something. Mine, it said, best of luck to our favorite Angie, Whiner. And I laughed it off at the time because, it was just what I thought it was normal. I was trained to laugh it off, not make a big deal. But now, as an adult, as a late diagnosed ADHDer, and doing all the healing work, going through my coaching program, understanding mental health a lot more clearly, seeing these patterns, all of it, I look back and realize that cake was a billboard of public shaming, and I was the punchline. I've even asked some of my siblings about this, and they were like, yeah, I didn't even think it was a big deal. Now I'm horrified.
Yeah, happened. As you kind of you grow and you learn and you do a lot of therapy and you read books and you come to understand that maybe some of the things that felt normal or were, you were told were normal were abusive.
Right.
The graduation cake is very messed up. I think we've talked about before, what was my initial perception of that? The first time I saw it, I think it was that in particular was oh, okay. It was weird, right? I didn't know what to think of it. But again, I think at that time, at the beginning of our relationship, you even framed it as, oh yeah, that's what they called me. That's my nickname because I'm always whining. You went along with it still, even 15 years ago. It was that was what it was, and you kind of shrugged it off. But I could tell that you were injured by it, even slightly. We didn't really talk about it after that, but it was okay, that...
And you kind of weren't making a big deal because I wasn't making a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was messed up.
Yeah. And this is just one example. It's a pretty blatant example of the insidious abuse that I endured growing up as the ADHD scapegoat. And, it's powerful because it's obvious. It's heartbreaking because it's obvious. And it captures, really, if you think about it, it's a covert cruelty that really so often defines the scapegoat experience in a family system like that.
Yeah. Do you remember the moment that it happened?
I don't really remember feeling anything other than normal, really. Of course my cake says that. Probably rolled my eyes. Of course my cake says that. Why wouldn't it?
But was it did you see it when everybody, did they bring it out?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Guests were there. It wasn't hey, here's your cake. What do you think? Behind, in your kitchen.
I don't think so. I think it was just we're setting up for the party, and it obviously I'm helping set up and do whatever needs to be done before it starts. And then it's just there. So yeah, so like it's presented before people are supposed to show up. So I have to get my shit together. I can't be upset even if
either way,
I
it's
wanted
jarring.
to be. Yeah.
There's not a great time to see it.
No.
But
nope.
Obviously, if they do it in front of everybody, then it's like a big show. Then everybody has to be in on the joke because, right? Like,
well, yeah.
You're seeing it along with them. So if you cry or like get mad in front of everybody, then
I'm ruining my own graduation party.
Right.
Right.
And of course, all of the guests are just going to be like, oh, okay.
Right. And I wonder now, looking back, how many of those guests were like sick to their stomach reading that, or, had a, bless you, Ellie, just like a feeling of, huh?
Yeah, confused.
Wow.
I'm trying to imagine if I went to a graduation party, right? Especially as an adult. If we went to a graduation party of a family friend, or, someone that one of our kids went to school with, and that was the cake that was put out, I would have to get the story, right? You have to ask the family, like, what's the deal with this? Like, what? But
unless they already know, unless they're in on it, and they've also been hearing that story for years.
Sure, yeah. But that was in the moment. The realization came years later.
Right. So there's been a couple times, I think actually like three times that I've shared it, one-on-one with someone outside of, either the podcast or my immediate family. And I remember sharing it first with my coaching program mentor, Lori, and we were just having like, it wasn't really coaching sessions. It was kind of like, we just had this talk one day. I asked to talk to her. I was really struggling with, not the program, but just everything that was kind of going on with my family. And I just asked her to talk. And I was kind of just sharing it in my mind at that time. So this is like 2022 and early 2022. And I was sharing it as like a small example of something that obviously it stood out to me as an example of how I was targeted, but just thought it wasn't super harmful because I wasn't being like screamed at or raged at or beaten, right? And she had to pause and, she said, "I'm so sorry. That's not okay. I'm so sorry that was your experience." And, she's someone who knows ADHD well. She has, a lot of background and experience with things like that. And it seemed like it was jarring to her that, I was almost minimizing how harmful it was. And so it it's kind of like a whiplash reaction when you're realizing it, like, wait, that wasn't normal. That wasn't funny. Or a small, insignificant thing. That was abusive. And just because that invalidation was so normalized in my upbringing, that even public cruelty like that felt like that's just how it is.
And that was 100% your dad, right? Like,
I don't know. That's the thing. I mean, the whole messaging, the whole way the family works came from him. It was his way or the highway. So yeah, it just fell in line. And there's no way my dad went and got the cake, because that's a chore for a woman in his mind. But yeah, like we even talked about it, like the person making the cake and having to write that on the cake. What? I get it. It was, 25 years ago.
I'm sure cake people write some weird shit on
Yeah.
cake. So,
but, like, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure. But I'm just, I'm trying to imagine what that whole scenario,
right.
how that whole scenario played out.
I don't really know.
I mean, my assumption is that it was your dad said, how about we do this? And your mom just kind of went along with it. I don't know that.
You know what just came to me?
What's that?
Just now is, I think it was a Reed's cake, and I worked at the Reed's Food Barn, the grocery store, my senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. And so I knew the people that I worked with that made the cake. And so I'm sure they were like, oh, it's probably a joke, like Angie, can laugh at herself or whatever, or whatever the scenario was. But that was definitely a cake from the place that I worked. I just realized that. Okay.
Great cakes, though.
Oh my God.
Let's be honest.
But that's why you got them there.
Let's get a Reed sponsorship going here.
I know, right?
Because
love me some Reed's cake.
Great baked goods.
Yes, but didn't that message? Wow. Okay. So the pattern beneath the cake, like we'll do another episode. Oh no, we just did an episode. Yeah, we just did an episode on patterns a couple episodes ago. Oh man, I'm just like boop 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 all
You're
over
deep
the
in
place.
the pod.
Yeah, I know.
You can't.
I know.
You're dug in.
But a few episodes back, we'll put it in the notes. Can you do that for me?
Sure.
All right, great.
Yeah, I can do anything.
But paying attention to the patterns and what shows up. And the story of the cake is really just a larger pattern of the cruelty that was, publicly and privately put on me. Mm-hmm. And that cake was just one moment in a long timeline of being ridiculed, dismissed, scapegoated for having needs, emotions, or just a different brain, really.
So what is insidious abuse?
Well, I think, the reason I shared that story as like just a one-off, and it wasn't so bad. I wasn't being raged at or beaten or whatever. And emotional abuse doesn't always look like screaming, hitting, to going to physical abuse, raging at someone. It's chronic emotional invalidation. And emotional invalidation can look like ordering you to feel differently, like stop being so sensitive, stop whining, Angie Whiner, trying to isolate you. You're the only one who's getting upset. No one else seems to have a problem with it. Like, you're singled out, you're isolated. Everyone else is on this side, you're on that side. Another way is like trying to make you feel guilty while invalidating you. So this is an actual quote that was directed at me. Just because you're miserable doesn't mean you need to try to make everyone else miserable too. So they're trying to make you feel guilty for being upset and reacting to the way you're being treated by them.
It makes you feel crazy.
And yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Because they act like they have nothing to do with you. It's all you. All you. Another way is minimizing your feelings. You're so dramatic. You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's not that serious. Rather than, what if?
Yeah, they can justify whatever they're doing by minimizing your emotions about whatever just happened.
Yeah, any and everything. Another part of insidious abuse is weaponized silence. So they make it known that you don't deserve clear communication that you're asking for or a resolution. They also use subtle sabotage. So like when they don't defend you, when someone's attacking you behind your back, or they withhold love as a form of control. So when you bring information to them like, hey, this person sent me a threatening text and ended it by telling me to kill myself, they just don't respond. So subtle sabotage, withholding love, when you don't get a response, when you go to these people who are supposed to love and care for you, you don't get a single response when something like that is said to you, which was said to me. What else would you call that? I mean, as the scapegoat, I'm just constantly set up to fail.
Right. So let's talk about why is it hard to recognize, right?
Right.
Abuse was your baseline. It felt like normal. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that in a lot of episodes with being abused as an adult. When you grew up in that environment, that becomes your normal.
Right.
And so,
then it's hard to recognize as anything but normal.
Yeah, and it in a twisted way, it feels good, right? It feels safe, even though it's or comfortable,
right?
Sure. That's just how your family jokes. You're a whiner. You're dramatic. It's not that bad. Minimize it. Mm-hmm. But those experiences deeply affect identity, trust, and mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's hard to recognize when it's all you've known. And when they are skilled at getting everyone on board that you outside of your home, friends, family, friends, teachers, everyone is getting that same messaging. So no matter where you go, you're set up to fail in that way. And you feel, which again makes you look back at yourself as the problem.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned teachers, especially like for some kids in an abusive household, school is their escape.
Right.
That is their safe place.
It really was for me in most scenarios.
Yeah. But both of your parents were teachers.
Right.
And so it was carried over.
Right.
Or it was just a continuation from house to school or from home to school. And it wasn't even like, oh, well, I only had my dad for one period or my mom for one period. Like you just said, they're talking to all of the other teachers. They're making it known, hey, if Angie says this at school, it's just about that. They're minimizing it, right? So anything that happens at home, they can get there first. Right. Another tactic that the narcissist uses is get there first and get out ahead of it so that my version is the truth.
Right.
And, anything that comes after is...
Well, and I think that's why, the teachers that, maybe weren't as mentally, emotionally mature would go along with what they said. But the other teachers that were like, that sounds weird. Or that doesn't track. I see this girl every day. Like I had a I think it was 7th grade earth science teacher who was amazing. And she always she saw who I was. She knew I had all this energy. She knew that, I feel like she could just see. And she ignored what she was told by them and really embraced me as a person. And, that's why I remember her so, clearly, and I adore her. And still to this day, I mean, we saw her a few years back. Well, Wyatt was really little, so many years back. But, and just greeted with love and embrace and, how are you doing stuff. So, yeah, it was a mix. Obviously going to school, it was less of a constant wait. I got breaks and I got to be around friends and
right. And too, it wasn't like every teacher was conspiring against you.
Right.
A lot of them saw through your dad's,
rhetoric,
smoke screens,
yeah.
right? Like, oh,
I'm sure
guy. Yeah, I'm sure that quite a few of them didn't really care for him anyway.
Right.
And so when he comes to school and like, hey, my kid's a bad apple, they see you every day and they're like, no, actually, when you're screaming at kids all day, you know, we can see right through that.
Right.
So
Exactly.
So what are some of the tactics that they use?
So some common overlooked, like all of these narcissistic abuse tactics are very highly overlooked because people want to live in denial, or people want to just, you know, when the most toxic person in the room, they don't want to deal with that person. So they tend to, the way they treat other people is overlooked because people are like, I don't want to deal with that person. But the silent treatment, it's used to punish. It's not peace. It's not removing yourself and going no contact. We talked about that before, but it really, the silent treatment is placed to try to get you to work harder to try to mend the fence. The public humiliation, like my cake, but it's masked as teasing. And so when I would be teased in front of other people, or I would be mocked in a conversation like I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about, then it would be, I'm too sensitive for standing up for myself, or telling them to stop, that, hey, this hurts my feelings. And it was like, oh, you can't take a joke. You're a whiner. But that wasn't it at all. I was just like, whoa, that's not funny. That's me. And now, as an adult, I have words that I could say back. But at that point, it was just like so confusing. I was just like, that's not what's happening. Another tactic is chronic blame. So it's always your fault. So I had to defend myself around something I never did, never thought. You know, how do you even begin to know how to do that as a kid? I can't do it as an adult. How do I defend myself from just complete made up shit? I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I didn't even think that. And that's being talked about as if it's fact. It happened. It's insane. So another tactic, minimizing emotions, like we said. It's like saying you're too sensitive for having any emotions. If you are standing up and holding a boundary, oh, you seem angry. What? I very calmly just said, this is not okay. If this happens, I'm going to leave. Or, you know, don't try to bring a present here from my mom.
Right.
Because it's not welcomed. And then it's like, you sound angry. Nope. I'm not accepting gifts when there's no relationship. And that's a tactic in order to bribe my children. It's very gross. Like, I'm not, and by the way,
you might be angry about it later, but in the moment, you're approaching it calmly.
There's also healthy anger where it's like, this is wrong, and which we talked about previous episode. I know that's a previous episode. See, but we talk about healthy anger. We'll continue to talk about it because, of course, you're angry,
right? But
you're not raging at someone. Your anger is normal. It's your guide to say this is not okay.
But it's construed as anger from them when you set your boundary and you say, no, thank you, we're not going to accept that gift. Oh, you seem angry. That's them projecting their own anger. Like they're mad that you're not accepting the gift.
Right.
They're mad about the situation.
Or they're mad that they have to deal with the fact that they have to say, sorry, I can't take a gift.
Right.
And then deal with that person.
Right.
You know? Like, I think the intention of this person was like, she was just trying to help. I don't think she really thought much past that. But obviously her response is so natural to this pattern.
Right.
You know? That she just reacted in that way. Another tactic they use is rewriting history. And they do that so you doubt yourself. You're so dramatic. You turn everything into, these made up stories. That's pretty crazy. And it was like, me and Val talked about it. Take everything Angie says and assume it's exaggerated rather than like, yeah, I can tell a funny story. But it doesn't mean that I'm lying, or I can say something with passion and it doesn't mean it's exaggerated. It's how I feel, right? Another tactic they use is, gaslighting you and telling you you're crazy. Because I could see their manipulation so clearly, they would call me crazy for figuring things out and letting them know that I knew what they were doing. And I talk about this when, on another podcast that I'm on, I can't wait to tell everybody about. But I used to play with my Matchbox cars, and I would line them up so perfectly. And I knew that when I would leave the room, usually just to pee or, go get a snack or something, I would come back and my older brother would, just push the cars. Like, he would just come in and just, like, swipe them. And then he realized that I knew that he was doing it. So he tried to come in and try to make a point that I was crazy. And so he just would, like, move a Matchbox car, like, just angle it enough to be out of the 90-degree angle I had it at, sure. Which I did on purpose to know that he was doing it. And when he came in and moved it, I would say, I know you were in here. I know you were messing with my stuff. Again, I'm in my room by myself, not bothering him, not doing anything to him. And would move it. And then I would yell. And, I was like 10, 11. You came into my room, stay out of my room, stop messing with my stuff, leave me alone. I'd be like, you're crazy. And then if anyone would come in, it doesn't look like everything's messed up.
Right.
So then, Angie is crazy. She's making a big deal out of him moving a car like that. But why the fuck would you do that? To mess with me.
Misplaced aggression. He's being emotionally abused by your dad, and he has to pick on someone. You're the scapegoat, so he goes to you.
But it's just like, I'm not crazy. You did come in here and do it, and he knew he did it. That still gets me. But just the utter cruelness of that.
Yeah.
Another tactic they use, triangulation. So they'll pull anybody else that they can into a conflict to isolate you and make you feel like you're the only one on your side. So this went on with my older brother a lot. It still does especially when it comes to my mom. But if she would talk to him about something that her and I talked about in confidence, she would come back with all these different narratives. She would kind of be cold to me. And it happened one time very, very, like, aggressively and weird. Come back saying, my intentions were to make her feel like she was a terrible mother and, make any sort of conflict resolution, which what I was attempting to do. Like, I wanted her to hear how I was hurting and, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on. How can I mend this? How can we, like, come together as a family? Any of that. And she talks to my older brother about it, and she comes back, and I have this malicious intent to make her feel less than when I'm having that conversation. And I was just, like, floored. But it was so obvious at that point, because I had seen this so much in recent years, that I immediately said, when that was her response, "Oh, you talked to him, didn't you?" Because she had a completely different version of reality than what I experienced. And of course, one where I was a terrible person causing the problems. So, triangulation can be used in any in any way, the second they feel like they can't answer your question because you just asked a question that will expose them, oh, go ask this person, or, I don't ask me, I don't have anything to do with it, ask this person. And you're just like, huh? Like it doesn't matter. And then another one is this scapegoat switcheroo. So when you set boundaries, they smear you. And so I'm the scapegoat. I say I'm done. I'm going no contact. So then my older sister is like calling out similar behaviors that I was also calling out. Okay, now Angie's manipulated her to think this. So not only are they minimizing her intelligence or the fact that she can make her own decisions, but they're acting as if I'm manipulating her, which I'm not. And then it goes on, and same thing happens to my younger brother. So like, if you're the person, especially if you're ever siding with the scapegoat, you also will become the scapegoat, even if they definitely get a lesser version of scapegoating than I get, but it still happens to them. Those are a lot of the tactics. It's not all encompassing,
right?
But those are a lot of them.
So what's the moment that you realized that it was never normal?
I think when you finally open up, a therapist pauses, a friend's eyes kind of widen, or someone says, wait, they said what to you? It's sitting back after those interactions, and then, the floodgates open and you're crying and there's grief and disbelief and, definitely anger behind it. And it hits so hard because you kind of built your identity around surviving that dynamic. And, you're gaslit to believe that you were the problem a lot of the times, just because it was coming from everyone that you could turn to for support. And then realizing it was abuse means you're grieving your childhood while you have to kind of reparent yourself and, break down the things that were said to you and how they're not true, how they don't define you, and in order to move forward.
Yeah. So let's talk about why is the scapegoat role so dangerous? The scapegoat exists to protect the family's illusion.
Right.
There are no scapegoats in healthy families.
Right. In a healthy family, they don't feel the need to place blame on anyone. They work together. Maybe someone did something wrong, but there's repair, there is, healing, there's coming together and support. But when you're in this toxic family dynamic, you're the identified problem as the scapegoat, so no one else has to look at themselves. If you are the only one that we're placing blame on, then the problem is never me or my behavior, it's always you. When you get angry, that's proof that you're unstable. When you have needs, that's proof that you're selfish. When you speak your mind and you use your voice, you're a threat to the hierarchy of this system. They need you silent. They need to break you. Right. And the most terrifying part is it doesn't always just stop because you go no contact or move out. That survival mode follows you into relationships, into work, into how you speak and speak to yourself, and you kind of shrink and you have doubt because the real world isn't what they said it was. It's what you believe about yourself and how you treat yourself because of it. Like, I was always told, you think they're your friends, these people are out to get you, these outside world, I'm preparing you for the outside world, you're never going to get away with that in the real world, at a job. all these things are said to you, so you're terrified of that, but you're also terrified in your home. So you are like really untrusting of everyone, and their toxic voice becomes kind of like the default setting of your inner critic. So I had this intuition, I had this knowing of who I was, and that if they would just understand, and like I was misunderstood for so long, but I still, it doesn't mean I was immune to the things that were said and done to me. I still held them as this belief, and I still was, anytime I interacted with them, it was, reiterated, this is who you are, this is what we think of you. And the emotional bruises carry on into future relationships, adult relationships, any sort of trust with another person, and your self-worth. And you doubt your judgment, you over-explain. Oh my gosh, I over-explained till I lost my voice, And you apologize for existing. Like, you constantly feel like you're a burden. And that's not good for anybody. And I know I showed up like that for you, at the beginning of our relationship. And we've talked about it, a bunch since then about, how we're growing and moving forward. And, it was just, I think I needed to feel safe, even with you, to get to a place where I could realize a lot of these things and know that I could tell you without you, judging me. Or, I think a lot of times when you go to share your experiences for someone to understand you and have a deeper connection, there's always that fear that they're going to use it against you. So that's what's terrifying.
That was your normal, right?
Yeah.
Any vulnerability that you showed was used against you. Right. And I think, when you talked about the hierarchy of the family, there really shouldn't be a hierarchy. Right. We're all equals. We're all working together as a family. And when you talk about a healthy family versus a family where there are scapegoats and that hierarchy exists, the healthy family, it's just a group of people willing to own their own shit. And when you make a mistake, you work with other people to repair that, and you grow together and you work together.
And you're in a safe place to authentically be yourselves. So you can learn things from each other, and you can teach each other things too. And it's a give and take. Yeah. And we all make each other better.
Yeah.
In a healthy family.
Absolutely. And you've said those exact words, like, I feel like a burden. Yeah. And that's how you were made to feel, right? In that hierarchy. If you're not contributing and if you're not perfect, then you're a burden. You're weighing us down. You're holding us back.
Or if you do something for me, then I'm going to owe you something.
Right.
You can't just do something nice for me, and I can't just do something nice for you. Because it's like, if I do something nice for you, you're going to think that... And I was always very careful about that. Like, no, I'm just doing a nice thing. You don't owe me anything. Like, I don't want... And I was like doing that preemptively, like you were going to think that. Because that's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah.
But you're not a burden.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean...
It's hard.
But if anything, you help build me up. Like, right? Like you said, it's someone to grow with and learn things from. We talk about it all the time on this podcast, but when we're not on camera or on mic, we talk about it too, right? I've learned so much from you about not just the family dynamics, but, to go back to what you said before about, like, in that family or in that, I guess, family dynamic where you have some of that kind of joking around. I remember early in our relationship, like, my family's love language is joking around, right? Like, we pick on each other, but it's because we love one another, and we kind of like tell tell those stories and, make fun of one another, but it's evenly distributed.
Safe. It's very different.
Right. It's evenly distributed though. And so everybody gets a taste of it. Right. And when we started dating, I remember we would leave family events and you were like, I felt like you were picking on me, or like, why did you keep joking about this? And you were very sensitive to it.
Right.
Now I'm more sensitive to the fact that you are like taking those things into account. And I'm even more sensitive to my own family, like at Easter, I think, or even at Christmas. Like I'm trying to think of like where a lot of the family was together, or Thanksgiving with your family. Mm-hmm. When people were joking around, I'm taking like mental notes now of like, okay, it seems like this person's getting quite a bit of it. So I'm going to I try to like divert some of that energy to other people now because I'm more conscious of it.
Right.
Whereas before I was like, oh, you know what? Everyone's an adult here. We can all handle it. You may have had a bad day. Like your animal might be sick, or you haven't gotten enough sleep, or something happened at work that you don't really let on, right? You hold that in, and then you're at a family event where it's supposed to be safe, and then people start piling on because it's just like we're all laughing and joking. You could go home feeling really bad about yourself, right? And so,
especially when that comes from a place where you're hoping that it's going to be happy interactions in a safe place, but the pattern is to always be attacked, you're more likely to feel attacked. And now, as the years have gone on and we do your family functions, I don't feel that way almost ever now. But if I do, we have like a signal. It's not like a bat signal or anything, but we have like all right, like, let's lay off. Or
we can just kind of give each other a look, and,
right,
and it's known. But I mean, I think the difference, and this is what you said as well, the difference in a healthy family relationship is that everyone knows that we're joking. In an abusive family, it's pretty much just scapegoating.
Yeah. It's mocking, it's belittling, it's making you feel less than. It's not a joke. It's not something that's funny. It just isn't.
Right. So what do you do now? How do you rebuild after realization?
So the first thing you have to do is validate yourself. So you don't need someone else to say it was abuse for it to count. And every time I uncover like a moment like this, it hurts, right? But it also heals me because now I know I wasn't a whiner. I was a kid asking for support in a world that didn't want to give it. And I don't laugh it off anymore. I name it. I own my truth, and I keep reclaiming the parts of me that they tried to shame into silence. And I think, like when you bring up, if I hear someone, someone's getting all the picking on and I'm trying to divert it, I think we also, because we work on ourselves so much and we really want to understand and we want there to be connection, that we hear those things. When those things are said, it makes our stomachs turn. It makes us feel uncomfortable. So we'll ask the question, what do you mean by that? Or we don't laugh along with this mean joke just to like let that moment pass because that was awkward. We are like, huh? We don't respond inauthentically anymore. And that's part of, once you're validating yourself and you're understanding what you're really experiencing, that comes from that. And you rebuild by finding safe people. So look for facial expressions of concern, not dismissal. Look for people who are asking you questions and you can ask them questions. You can tell a lot of times what someone is, their intention is, I guess, in a conversation if you truly step back and are able to look at their mannerisms, timing of certain questions, or, bringing something up, or, there's ways to find the safe people once you feel safe in yourself. Another thing is use language. So I know a lot of times people are like, oh, everyone's called a narcissist these days, or everyone says what they're doing is gaslighting. But I also think it's really hard when you've grown up and this is your quote unquote normal. When you finally say, no, this was abusive. This was emotional abuse. I didn't actually have a relationship with my family. We were just enmeshed. I never said those things. I have no idea where they're coming from. Well, that's projection. That person is doing those things, so they're going to accuse you of doing it so no one looks at them. And then, again, triangulation is, a big word that people don't really realize is actually, that's a lot of the gossiping, a lot of the getting ahead of stuff to, acting as if just making up, hey, your friend said you're just like this, so I'm not the only one. That friend didn't say that at all. But they're trying to use things that they know will hurt you, to make you feel alone. So using that language, you don't necessarily need to use that to the abusive people because, again,
they'll minimize it.
Why are you talking? They'll minimize it. They'll act like you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, oh. My dad used the don't come to me with that psycho mumbo jumbo. And I was like, oh, this is communication.
Right.
Like, I don't...
And writing it off as everyone's a narcissist now, or you didn't have the language to express what
I didn't
exactly
know what
what was happening.
Were.
And sometimes if there wasn't a name for it at that time, or you just didn't have the name for it at that time, it was hard to explain. Just like growing up when you were an undiagnosed ADHD kid, you didn't have the words to express what you were feeling and doing. And now, I feel proud and relieved for our kids who do have that language.
Right.
So when something is happening, they can stop and say, Dad, you don't get it. My brain is doing this right now.
Right.
And Wyatt did that to me the other day. Like, you don't understand what my brain's doing right now. It's doing this. And he could tell me what it felt like in his head, which helps me.
Right.
Right? I
Language
don't know what
matters,
his brain is doing.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, language can also be weaponized by the abusive people.
Sure.
So you definitely pay attention, but I think language just gives you the foundation to do your own healing. Another thing you got to stop explaining. You don't owe your story to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. And that is something that I had to learn very hard. I just wanted to, I was like, no, they just don't get it. They really don't hate me. They just don't understand. Constantly feeling misunderstood, and really they didn't want to hear any of it. And that became very clear when I did all the things that you need to do to prove that what I'm saying is not a lie, or it's not just a feeling, and they still, whatever, doesn't matter. Therapy and coaching. So spaces where you're believed and not blamed, and you're given tools to help in your healing. Very important. And let go of the word normal. Just because it was common in your family doesn't mean it was right. Normal isn't the same as safe at all. And when emotional abuse is the air you breathe, silence feels like love. Breaking the cycle starts when you name what they taught you to not notice. They don't want you to be educated. They don't want you to be aware, because then you have power to stand up for yourself. So if you've ever shared a family story and someone looked stunned, you're not crazy. You were conditioned to feel like that was a normal story to tell. Emotional abuse that's normalized really becomes invisible to you until it just isn't. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But that's where the healing begins. The world you once accepted will never look the same again. And it's beautiful. It really is. You're not broken. You are blamed. The power of speaking the truth out loud is that it shatters the silence that abuse depends on.
You are not the scapegoat.
Nope.
You're a cycle breaker.
That's right. So if this episode spoke to you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who gets it, and drop a quick review. It helps more ADHD scapegoats find their way here. You're not alone, and you're not the problem. Till next time.